Alright, so we're going to do some more recoding here. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to our student ID and we're going to look at recoding them into their student type again. But instead of using a function, I am going to use the cut feature. And what the cut feature does is take numeric data and breaks it into chunks based on value you send. So it's going to be 0 to 17, 17 to 23, 23 to 100. And as you can see, it takes every value and decides what bin it should be in. And if you look at this notation, we have the parentheses and the square brackets. And the parentheses means less than or greater than, and the square brackets mean less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So it's so this is from 17 to 23, 23 to 100, 17 to 23. Now, pretty cool, but if we look at the next one, I am going to do the exact same thing, but now instead of just putting the bin cuts, I'm going to use the cut label. I'm going to assign labels to them. So I have a list of labels that I'm going to send to the cut function with the list of cut values, and I get the labels in here, not just the cut points, which is much more useful. If we look at the next one, which is Recode 3, I am now, instead of coming up with the data values beforehand, I'm letting the system create the cut points. And at this point, I'm doing quartiles, so I have my labels as quartiles, and I'm sending it to 4 bins. So this way, you don't need to know the value range that you're working with. You say, I want in quartiles, and it will separate your data into 4 almost equal groups. If you did 5, it would break it into 5 almost equal groups based on number. So it's not, if you had values 1 to 100, it would not do 1 to 20, 21 to 25. It would try and fill the bins based on the number of people that you would be putting in the bins. So it's another way of recoding your data into bins. If we look at Recode 8, I'm going to show you how to access values in other rows. Earlier we looked at accessing values in the same row. Now we're going to look at accessing values in another row. So if we look here, I have temperature data, and I just have one temperature row. Using the assign value to come up with a new column, I'm going to take this value, my temperature value, and I'm going to subtract from temperature minus 1, which is the row behind. So I do 65 minus nothing is nothing. 67 minus 65 is 2. 65 minus 67 is minus 2. 64 minus 65 is minus 1. 65 minus 64 is 1. So you can see you can start accessing values in other rows. So think about if you were doing customer counts. And the turnstiles work this way in the MTA data. You have the turnstile gives a number at the end of the day, and then the number at the end of the next day. How do you figure out how many people used it? You subtract this day from yesterday's value, and that's how many people have used that turnstile during the day. Same thing if you're doing odometer readings. This is used all the time, so this is an important thing you might want to know if you're working with found data sets. And this is doing the same column. If we look at Recode 9, it does similar things. So I now have a high value and a low value, and what I want to do is look at the difference between the low value, assuming the night before, and the high value in the afternoon of the day. So you have to go not only to a different row, but a different column. So we can shift the rows and the columns to do my subtraction, and then we can get the difference here. So you now have ways of looking at accessing data to do math on the same row, and in different rows, but in the same column, and different rows and different columns. And those are going to be very useful to you as you need to manipulate your data, especially in found data, because you can't organize the data to fit how you want to analyze it. And we're going to be using assign, and we're going to be using recode, and we're going to be using cut, and we're going to be using map to do those things.